too much time because guess what, folks? The first few months of the year are pretty busy for us as well. So I can't hang around long, but I can't hang around long enough just to give you a bird's eye view and a take on well, where I think that we're headed. And I would advise anybody who's planning on uh, getting out their scorecard and just kind of judging how things are currently versus what they will look like in the future. I would say to you, now's that time to do that. Right? You need to take a look at the way things are right now. So take a look at your gas prices. Right? Gas prices around here are around 285, 287. Let me take a look at what the gas buddy says currently. But yeah, that's a far cry from where we started, right? Remember, we started somewhere around three, and I think it got all the way to almost $4 a gallon, right? So gas prices have come down. Um, um, Inflation is still, you know what? This is the strange part about the inflation thing. It says average gas prices right now are 316. Where I am, it's like 289. But of course, that's with my gas buddy discount and some other stuff. But anyway, they say inflation has come down, has moderated. But there was a report. The during the month of December, the Fed came out with this last rate cut, and they told us that this is something that I've been telling a lot of people. I mean, a number of people who talk with me about, their healthcare concerns and the rest. We end up having conversations about the landscape of politics and how it looks and so on and so forth. And one of the things that often comes up is the fact that um, prices are just too high. And I ask these individuals because most of them are older than me. I ask them about their memory as to the 1970s and how high inflation was back then. And is there a correlated? Can you find correlation between that then and today? And for most people, yeah, there's a correlation. However, they do say that the numbers today smack a little bit different than the numbers during the 1970s. And I can guarantee that that's true. The reason why I think that's true is because, when eggs during the 1970s cost a lot, you can get let's say a dozen of eggs for 99 cents. It's a whole lot, big difference between now getting a dozen of eggs for $8. So that's a big difference. Okay. So yes, it does hit different. And I remember, or the reason why I bring this up is because I remember the Fed chief on TV during the month of December saying that even with inflation down to, let's say, 2.8, 2.9%, they're not going to reach target, which is 2% or less, for at least another 3 years. Now, this is something that I had told people about during last year. And remember, this is the first year that we've been doing this. So I'm still within the first year of launching this channel, and having a good time with it. But it does take a lot of work. But my point is, I told you then, about a year ago, when we started talking about Bidenomics and the rest of it, that when it comes to inflation, it's going to be easy to come from 9% down to like 3%. That part's going to be easy. The hard work is going to be getting back to baseline, which should be somewhere around 2% or less, right? And the reason why that's going to be hard is because, you can suck out the stimulus. Okay. You can suck out the stimulus, but it's very hard to get around. Very hard to get around. My favorite topic. Okay. Very hard to get around the tariffs. So when you look at the effects that tariffs will have, some of the lasting reasons why inflation has remained stubbornly above that threshold or that target is because of the tariffs. So, don't expect that to change. And the Fed said don't expect it to change until probably like 2018. And by the way, if we go on another round of tariffs. Just anticipate that the inflation is going to get higher. Now, and for most people, maybe you don't understand that. And I would say, I ask myself. I mean, my degree is in political science, right? But in the course of political science, you do take a lot in the way of economic courses and the rest of it. But when you look at it, I wonder myself. I wonder about the economy. I wonder if we go on this next round of tariffs, what that's really going to do to the economy. I don't know. And you know what? Look, I if anybody who's been watched the show before, I do spend a little bit of time talking about why I can't stand supply side economics. And I'll be honest with you. Look, I'm not the only person that can't stand supply side economics. You're looking at Republicans today that can't stand supply side economics, but you don't hear them talking about it. I mean, they're all riding on the fact that Donald Trump can fix this. When I'm here to tell you, I'm not quite certain that that's the case. So that being said, here we are, folks. It is what it is until it ain't. Okay, so Donald Trump takes office here over the next hour, and they're planning massive deportation. They're planning tariffs, right? They have mentioned that they would like to acquire Panama, Canada, Greenland, whatever. And believe it or not, a lot of these areas that they want to acquire them for one particular reason. Trump's design. Trump has said that it's his goal to drive down the cost of inflation by, well, flooding the supply zone, right? I mean, the hallmark of supply side economics. Two things I'll say about this. One, Trump's really not a supply sider. But the second thing I'll tell you is the important part. The hallmark of supply side economics is to, well, you drive down the cost by increasing supply. So that's the reason why they talk in terms of drill, baby, drill. That's the reason why they talk in terms of, all of these notions where most Americans just can't quite understand. Well, I mean, they understand it empirically, but the details are a little murky, right? So when you hear Trump talk about drill, baby, drill, and you look at the data, and that was suggested that we're drilling more today than we ever have in the history, you could ask yourself, how much drilling do we need to do in order to truly affect the supply, in order to truly drive down the cost of energy? Energy costs leads to transportation cost increases, leads to consumer or business cost increases, leads to consumer costs, their increases as well. So all of these things do correlate. The question is whether or not you will be able to drive down the cost by just turning on the spigot and letting it run. I think that has adverse effects as well. So we shall see how that turns out. But remember, yeah, they want to deport 15 million people. They look. There's a number of different things that Republicans, in particular, and I will say Donald Trump, has spoken on their behalf that they wish to do. And for some of these things, well, I'm not going to say some. This is going to sound contrary to what most Democrats will say, right? And by the way, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an independent. But I bring this up because Democrats, their whole goal over the next 4 years will be to counter whatever Donald Trump wants to do. I mean, that's the way it's generally done, right? So if Donald Trump says he wants to deport 15 million people, Democrats will say, no, we're going to save these 15 million people. Okay. That's the way it generally works. I would suggest to Democrats, just allow it to happen. Right. And see where we end up. Now, there are some logical conclusions that we got to talk about if you do allow it to happen, right? So if you allow it to happen, that just means that, 15 million jobs become available to Americans who, by the way, don't want those jobs to begin with. So there's that, right? So there's bound to be a problem with that. Okay. But on a grand or more macro picture, I'm going to tell you the whole issue around immigration in particular has never made any sense to me whatsoever. I mean, there is a famous 1984 debate with Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale. And Ronald Reagan is talking about amnesty and the fact that in 1984, Reagan says this issue of immigration, and I think he's speaking specifically about the southern border, right, has been an issue for several presidential cycles. Reagan says that in 1984. It's the same message that where we find ourselves today. So we can say that really for the past 40 or 50 years, has anything really changed on that? No, it hasn't. But there's a truth behind the reason why it hasn't changed. And the reason why it hasn't changed is because, folks, there are jobs that happen here in the United States that a lot of Americans don't want. And I say Americans, I'm talking about, well, white America in particular. Okay, so I'm not being funny about it, but I'm just saying there are jobs that white America just doesn't want. And there's jobs that African Americans don't want. And I got to tell you, I mean, I haven't seen a job yet that Hispanics don't want. They want all the jobs. They have a greater hunger. Okay. And that shows up. So even all the way back to 84, we've been talking about this issue of immigration in the southern border. But it happens and is happening because, well, there's a lot of jobs around here that need to be done. You have a number of Americans that don't want to do them, right? And you have the reality in this situation is that most Americans don't want to do them because they, well, maybe they don't pay that well. Perhaps. I don't know. But the reality is they're here for a reason. The other reason why they're here is because employers keep hiring them. That's the reality of it. Now, I know that Republicans are going to put on the face over the next 4 years that they're going to put the kibosh on employment and employers who employ people who come across the southern border. We'll see exactly how that works. I think it's going to be more of a game that they play as opposed to having any true substance behind it. Personally, that's the immigration issue. So, I mean, the immigration issue is going to happen. Again, I said it and I'll say it again. I think Democrats really just need to embrace it, get it out of the way. You know what? Perhaps they're right. But perhaps they're right. But perhaps they're right. They may be right. It just doesn't seem plausible that you can remove 15 million people and that does, the economy just comes to life and just roars like gangbusters, right? Don't see it happening. There's the same that happens, or when you look at look, everybody saw the tech bros talking about the H-1B1 visa. And I got to tell you, I learned a few things from that discussion. I don't know about you, but I learned a few things about that discussion because what we were able to determine was that H-1B1 people, I mean, it kind of does look like indentured servitude, right? If they lose their job, they can go home. They have to go home, right? And they don't make a whole lot of money. I mean, relatively speaking. So, for example, if you are in the tech world and you got to pay an American $150,000, they can bring the immigrant in here and pay them, let's say, $70,000. And the immigrant will take the money because $70,000 was better than what they were making in India or wherever they came from, right? The Pan Asian countries, right? And the other thing you got to remember is that, you know, America, everybody knows about the show Dirty Jobs, and you know, you got this guy out there and he's in like sewers and doing things that most Americans don't want to do, and he's saying that you can make lots of money doing this, right? We also have told Americans that they didn't need anything more than a high school education, right? So when Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk talk about the reason why hiring the H-1B1 people is a plus or a benefit, you know, they're saying it because America is addicted to, well, the dirty job, right? They don't want the 4-year degree in STEM. And if you look at any of the data around higher education, bachelor's degree, I mean, I think the number is really, I think it's like 27% of Americans have a bachelor's degree, something crazy like that. And then there's like a smaller number of people with bachelor's degrees, right, that are in the STEM. It's like 7% or something crazy, right? However, when you think about people in, let's say, Malaysia, when they almost have half the population has a bachelor's degree, it's huge, and there's a large number of them who have degrees in STEM. It's incredible. Or look at India. India is interesting too because remember, there's a billion people there, and it may only be like 17% of the population have a bachelor's degree, and of the 17%, you know, it's like 80% of them have degrees in STEM. So, um, you know, I've got a billion people. That's 100 million people that Silicon Valley can look at for employees versus, you know, call it what, 6 million Americans. Big difference. And there will be a lot of people who will put light on the fact that there's tension between MAGA and the tech bros, right? But at the end of the day, they're still going to vote the way they vote. It's not going to change anything. They're just going to have a debate about it. And they may say some choice words to one another, but for the most part, it's not going to change the way they do anything. So, I mean, at the end of the day, folks, look, Trump is going to take office here in a few minutes. I see him, they're praying, and, you know, this show will begin. And now's the time to take that snapshot of prices where they are now and what they will look like over the next year and what they're going to look like over the next 4 years. And it's true. I mean, you can look at the theme of Bidenomics, and you could say, yeah, all the metrics showed that it's working. You saw interest rates come back down to 3%. You saw job growth, you know, 250,000 jobs on average monthly. That's huge. You never were going to get the consumer confidence numbers to look the way that they needed to look. And the reason why that, I mean, it's just because the truth of the matter is that Americans are addicted to low costs, right? Low prices. And this economy under Bidenomics, because of the pandemic, because of tariffs, because of supply side issues and the rest, right? You just saw that it was never going to be the case that it would get in line to where people would expect it to be or feel comfortable with it. And so now, I mean, we're going to see over the next 4 years what the Trump administration will be able to do. Now, I know they're talking about changing the Gulf of Mexico's name to the Gulf of America. Big deal. So what? Let them change it. Is that going to change the cost of fuel? No. Supply changes the cost of fuel. So I would tell people don't listen to so much of what he's saying. Look at what they're doing. That will tell the true story. And I think what you will see based on what they're doing, you're going to see a situation that sets up to where you see that there may not be very much that they're going to be able to do in order to affect prices. They're just going to, they're going to spend a lot of time spinning a tail. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not quite certain prices are going to go anywhere. And I could be wrong. I could be. And if I am, that's okay. I'm all right. I'm all right with that. I mean, I just see it a particular way. If it turns out to not be that particular way, I'm okay with that. I think anybody should be okay with that. People don't like being wrong. I don't understand that. I think I learn more about myself in particular, but I learn more in general, right? When I'm wrong about things. That just means that uh, I see something different now. So I could be wrong. But at the end of the day, I also see that you know, some of these things, macroeconomics and microeconomics, will ultimately show up. And when they do show up, I think that there will be a surprise by a number of the American people that ultimately, I mean, the window dressing is great, but the proof is in the pudding. And that's it. So if I were Democrats, I'd be like, you know what? Don't resist. Don't. We need to go down this road. Because at the end of the day, I think I'm going to say this, and this is probably not going to sit well with a lot of people, but we could be looking at a changing of the guard on the global scale. You have people running around and yelling and screaming about globalists and all the rest of it, right? Well, we live in a global economy. If you want to go back to an economy that's grown organically from within, well, prices will really need to reset. I mean, cost of eggs need to go down to 99 cents, right? I mean, if you want to affect um, the American's pocketbook in a positive way, you have to well, you're going to have to embark on the supply side thinking yet again in hopes that it works. I'm here to tell you the reason why I talk a lot about supply side economics, and again, the reason why I don't necessarily like it. But I got to tell you, I went through last year, I spent the time going through Milton Friedman, his some of the writings, and I watched a lot of the videos, not the YouTube stuff. I'm talking about the show that came on during the 80s, Free to Choose. And I gained an appreciation for what Friedman was saying. And I'm here to tell you, for the most part, I understand what Friedman was saying with regard to supply side economics. I also understand how the understanding during the 1980s, right, turned out not to be true. There are a couple reasons why it turned out not to be true. Remember, the whole notion of supply side economics, there's a couple things that we need to be aware of. When you think of supply side economics, you want to flood the supply side in order to drive down cost. If you drive down cost, then that's where the demand will show up. Okay. But there are hallmarks to supply side economics. One of those is cutting taxes, right? One of those is cutting regulations, right? Uh, the things that make supply side economics, I guess you could say, attractive is that if you do flood the supply zone and drive down the cost, then for the American people, things become less expensive and their dollar goes a lot further. All right. All those are great things. But there are some other things that happened during the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Businesses learned a lot about supply side economics because we would have these boom and bust cycles, right? Republicans would be in office and everybody would say it was great, right? Democrats would get in office and everybody would say that it was crappy, but turned out to be not too bad. Think about the years during the Clinton years, right? That's our 8-year period, and during the last, especially the last 4 years, I mean, it was a gold mine. And remember, the hallmark of the Clinton administration was the middle class tax cut and a couple other things that took place, right? So, and they had an emphasis on um, labor, right? Now, we did see the Clinton administration sign NAFTA, right? So we saw that formation of that free trade zone between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. We saw that develop, and we did see jobs leave and go to Canada and Mexico in order to bring goods here cheaper, right? Businesses learned from these environments. So there is not an environment today that businesses haven't thrived in over the past really 20 years. Think about it. It's true. So when you see how businesses have adapted to supply side economics, they can adapt to supply side economics by not flooding the zone with supply. I mean, if you listen to businesses today, everything is about their on time, right on time supply chain, right? They're not flooding the zone with cheaper prices. They want price stability. And that's the reason why, especially over the past really 20 years, you've seen the stock market just take off like a rocket. They figured it out. Well, on the way to figuring it out, I mean, it didn't do much to curb the inflation. Inflation still stayed around 1.5%, 2%. And I don't care how long you do this, at some point, even at 1.5 or 2%, over 40 years or so, that number still is taking a bigger bite out of the apple every year. And that's what you saw. So businesses got better at being able to manipulate supply side economics to get what they needed out of it. What happens? Okay. And with the advent of tax cuts, right? The business owners in particular and the businesses itself, I mean, were able to, well, get to a place where they could control 80%, 85% of the nation's wealth. So we're here for a reason. And the question will be, did we or have we really learned anything? And I got to tell you, I mean, the last 4 years, what did we learn? Well, you know what? We learned that the metrics can be in line and the people can still hate the metrics, right? What did we learn from the past 4 or the years that Trump was in office? I mean, this is me, okay? Um, did the tax cuts affect my business? Yes. I'm a small business, and I'm here to tell you it impacted my business negatively. I got to tell you, I paid more in taxes during the Trump years and the Biden years than I ever have. So the situation in most cases for, I believe, small businesses of America hasn't gotten better. And you need to understand that. I mean, most people think that, if you can get a small business and you'll do better. Well, you can, but just remember that on a whole, if you don't have much in the way of deductions, and if you can't, turn your business into a S corp or a C corp, you're probably going to spend some money. And it's kind of hard to do marketing and advertising and all the things you need to do in order to grow your business when your tax load gets greater every year. That's the truth. And you're constantly trying to find ways around how can I mitigate the tax picture. And most people will say you can mitigate the tax picture by, cutting taxes. Well, I'm okay with that. But make sure that you're cutting them for me. Because I will tell you that even though, let's say that on my on the individual side, you can say that I paid less in taxes, or I made more money. But no, I really didn't make more money. That 20 or 2,500 bucks per household that you got during the Trump years under that tax cut, mm, it was already earmarked to go somewhere. It didn't necessarily go towards savings. It went to trying to make sure that we're running a business effectively and efficiently. Okay. So, all that to be said, look, folks, I mean, things are going to be strange over the next 4 years. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be much to do about nothing, because you are where you are. And for Americans, because the business cycle is what it is, and I think you're bumping up against what I would refer to as some economic norms. And these norms show us that we could be dealing with a situation where the game may have passed Americans by. And we'll find out. Now I want to spend some time listening to what Trump has to say. So, folks, I hope you have a good day. And hey, enjoy the next 4 years.